Welcome back to Postmortem, where we break down the most complex, emotional, and perplexing cases featured on Beyond the Confession. Today's review dives straight into the season premiere episode that left viewers unsettled, divided, and questioning everything they thought they knew about intent, motive, and the mysteries of the human mind. It's the case of 17-year-old Ben Elliott, who stabbed and killed his twin sister, Megan, in 2021, a crime no one saw coming, a family with no history of violence, and a defense that forced the courtroom and viewers to wrestle with the idea of sleepwalking as a legitimate explanation for a deadly act. The episode opens with host Anne-Marie Green, joined by 48 Hours correspondent Eri Moriarty, who brings more than 3 decades of legal reporting experience to the table. Right away, Erin emphasizes how unusual this case is, even compared to the hundreds she's covered across 35 seasons. Not only because the accused is a minor, but because he admits to the physical act, stabbing his sister while insisting he had no intent to harm her. He says he was sleepwalking. That's where the hour-long emotional tug-of-war begins. Anne-Marie explains that as she watched, her opinion kept shifting. One moment she felt convinced it might have been an accident. The next, she questioned the plausibility of the defense. Erin shares that she went through the same transformation. At first skeptical, then deeply conflicted. She highlights one major flaw in the legal system this case exposes. A traditional courtroom setup demands a binary outcome, guilty or not guilty. But what about the vast gray area where someone commits the act but may not have intended it? That's where this case sits on uncomfortable middle ground. The review dives into Erin's unique perspective as a twin. She explains that the emotional bond is unlike any other, a relationship formed before birth. There were no signs of conflict between Ben and Megan, no fights, no resentment, no history of anger. Witnesses testified that Ben was protective of his sister, who was autistic and sometimes struggled socially. He cared for her, looked out for her, and communicated with her in ways only twins can. That's part of what makes this case so troubling. How does a loving, protective brother end up stabbing his twin in the middle of the night? Anne-Marie points out that prosecutors argued the sleepwalking defense was fabricated, but they struggled to provide a motive. No angry texts, no hidden resentment, no diary entries. Nothing in their digital lives suggested tension. And in a world where teenagers document everything, the absence of conflict is striking. Erin brings up another important detail. Ben was constantly on his phone. If he had planned to use sleepwalking as a defense, he would have researched it, but his phone had no search history on the topic. That lack of planning made the prosecution's theory feel less solid. The conversation shifts into explaining parasomnia category that includes behaviors like sleepwalking, sleep eating, and even violent actions committed while in a deep, non-REM sleep state. Both sleep experts for the defense and prosecution agree sleepwalking is real. Where they disagree sharply is whether Ben's actions fit the pattern. The defense expert argues that sleepwalkers can experience memory fragments, which explains why Ben faintly recalls stabbing Megan. The state's expert says that's impossible. If he remembers it, even partially, he wasn't sleepwalking. It's a debate viewers will find themselves pulled into throughout the episode. Anne-Marie raises the question, how likely is it that someone sleepwalking can perform complex actions like pulling a knife from a sheath, navigating a room, stabbing another person, and then making a phone call? Erin notes that documented cases do exist. People have cooked meals, driven cars, and even committed violent acts while sleepwalking. What complicates everything is the lack of witnesses. Only 2 people were in the room that morning: Ben and Megan. And Megan tragically can't speak for herself. One of the most unsettling elements the episode highlights is Ben's 911 call. His voice is extremely soft, almost whispery, which struck both prosecutors and viewers as odd. During trial, the prosecutor reenacted and mocked his whisper. But Erin clarifies that Ben naturally speaks that way. When she interviewed him in jail, She experienced the same quiet, emotionally flat tone. He doesn't show much outward emotion, something that deeply hurt him in court, because jurors often use demeanor as a substitute for truth. Anne-Marie points out one detail that bothered her: the fact that Ben didn't call out for his parents immediately after the stabbing. Erin offers an alternative perspective. As a twin, Ben may have focused only on Megan in that moment, not thinking about his parents until prompted by the 911 operator. It's a detail that could reasonably be seen two different ways, which is exactly what makes this case so hard to interpret. The episode then explores the moment first responders arrived. Body cam footage shows Ben performing CPR on Megan as his parents stand nearby in shock. Police refuse to explain what happened, which seems cold, until Erin explains why. Officers had no idea who was involved. They couldn't risk tipping off potential suspects before gathering information. For viewers, it has a window into the chaos that erupts when police enter an active scene with almost no context. The prosecution later used the family's decision to call a lawyer against them, framing it as suspicious, as if they were trying to craft a story within minutes of the tragedy. But Erin counters this narrative strongly. Families in crisis often call the most knowledgeable person they know. In T's case, that was a family friend who happened to be an attorney. That call helped them learn Megan had died. Using that moment of panic against grieving parents only deepened the tragedy. The jury got to watch Ben's entire police interrogation. His flat affect, his quiet responses, and moments where he talked about unrelated topics like taking a sat were all interpreted as disturbing and detached. Erin explains that when she interviewed him, he said he shut down emotionally because he couldn't bear the reality of what happened. Trauma rewires the brain in strange ways, especially in teens, and Ben's coping mechanism looked cold when viewed through a courtroom lens. The episode breaks down the key evidence that ultimately convinced jurors. The number of stab wounds too was used to argue intent. The depth of one wound in particular troubled them. The prosecution also theorized that Ben used a pillow to silence Megan, preventing blood spatter from hitting the wall. Ben says he used the pillow to stop the bleeding. Without witnesses, both versions are speculation. But the jury found the prosecution's framing more persuasive. Initially, jurors were split 7-5. But after deliberation, they all voted guilty of first-degree murder. Many viewers will question whether first-degree was appropriate, given the uncertainties and Ben's age. Even jurors felt conflicted. One wrote to the judge, asking for leniency during sentencing. Prosecutors wanted 40 years. The judge gave Ben 15, leaving him eligible for parole in 2032 at age 28. Erin suggests that the relatively short sentence may reflect lingering reasonable doubt, even if the jury couldn't unanimously agree to acquit. The review closes with a heartbreaking update on the parents, who've lost a daughter and feared losing their son. During interviews, they held hands the entire time, leaning on each other to survive the unthinkable. They remained devastated, confused, and haunted by unanswered questions. The episode leaves echoing long after it ends. In the final moments, Erin shares details about her other podcast, adding more context to the emotional, psychological, and legal complexities explored in this episode, leaving viewers thinking long after the screen fades.